Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to Transforming 45. I'm your host, Lisa Boat. In this podcast, we dive deep into the transformative power of storytelling. I firmly believe that stories have the magical ability to heal, inspire, and connect us. That's why I'm here to bring you the incredible stories of women who have journeyed through life's ups and downs and emerged as their most authentic selves. We'll explore stories of resilience, reinvention, and the courage it takes to embrace change. It's a space where authenticity shines, where the messy and the beautiful moments of life come together to create something truly extraordinary. So, brilliant listeners, get ready for a roller coaster of emotions, a burst of inspiration, and a whole lot of love. Transforming 45 is not just a podcast, it's a movement, a celebration of incredible humans who light up the world. I'm so grateful you are here, and I can't wait to embark on this transformative journey with you. Let's dive in and start transforming together. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Transforming 45. This week, I've been looking forward to this conversation. Anka and I met, like a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago now, and we had such a lovely connection. And so I've been looking forward to revisiting the conversation we had and adding to it. So welcome to the show, Anka. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you. I am honored to be here. Lisa, thank you.
And Anka is a board certified functional nutritionist, which I know is going to be of great value to lots of people who are listening. Anka's passion is helping others succeed with their goals and find their joy through creating a solid foundation in health and in life. For everyone, Anka helps people clarify their health goals, shift through the vast amount of well care information that's available. That's something we're going to talk about. Yeah. And then offers a variety of modalities, including coaching, consulting, and intuition to ultimately achieve what's important to them.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So many things to talk about today. So let's start at the beginning. So Anka, who are you and how did life introduce you to this version?
That is a great question, Lisa. And feel free to get the hook at any time and tell me to stop if I get long-winded. So I came to this because I myself needed healing and am still in a healing process. And I think I know I am my client who is the chronically unwell. And I've shared that term because I felt that there are too many people who have too many seemingly normal symptoms or things that we look at as normal, like headaches and all of that kind of thing, when those things are not normal. And that's really how I grew up. I grew up, now I know, with multiple food sensitivities that unfortunately exacerbated all kinds of wellness issues for me. And I am coming up to my 60th decade in a couple of months. But as I look back at each decade of my life, I can say, boy, this decade was really good. And when I think about really good, it always comes back to the quality of life that I was able to experience and my wellness that I was able to experience. So that still doesn't answer the question is how I got to where I am, but I've always been a science nerd. I've always loved science. I have had multiple different careers. Many of them have been around science. And I feel like in the last decade, I have come home back to the science of looking really closely at functions in the body. So not just anatomy, physiology, that kind of thing, kinesiology, but how does all of this function in the body? And for myself, I am my client. I am the poster child for working on my own healing. I don't know when it will be done. People will ask me that question. I don't know. My body will tell me. I know I'm in process. And I also know that I am blessed with and given a lot of the challenges that I face personally so that I can help others heal through my own digging for the information. And we may get joined by my cat here in a minute. So,
That's okay. My dogs are rolling around down here too.
okay, good.
We're well supported by the creature community today.
There you go. Yes.
So, oh gosh, so many things I wanted to pull out of that. But one, this is something that has been rolling around in my head a lot lately. And that is, were we to shift the perspective of healing from a destination to a journey, what would the impact of that be?
Wow. Pandora's box open. um,
Hmm.
that is probably one of the biggest things that I deal with on a daily basis with my clients, because we live in a quick fix society, especially I think in the Western part of the world. And when I'm talking about quick fix, it's not just all the things that you see advertised on social media and all the promises that you get and all of those things, but it actually goes beyond that to where I guess it comes back to what I said, when am I going to be done healing? I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, I've had a lifetime of getting to where I am today. So what does that mean for the rest of my lifetime? And what does being healed mean? It's not a static place. It's dynamic. It's always dynamic. And so I think to come back to what you're sharing is that or asking rather, is that I feel like, healing is a dynamic process. So if you want to take the word journey away or path, like I have a lot of things in my wheelhouse where I talk about your path to wellness and how it's unique and every individual is unique. That healing is dynamic. And in that, in it being that dynamic, the journey, I'm getting a little off topic here, but the journey is taking us wherever it takes us.
Mhm.
So I don't know, yeah, if you want to kind of bring me bring me
Yeah,
back.
it's
Um,
well, you're articulating a lot of the things that I've been thinking about, and there's in our very fast fix culture, one of the things that I'm observing in humans around me is that it's almost like the search for the fix is becoming the thing
oh,
instead of actually healing or being on that pathway. So when you're constantly looking for something to fix you, it's what one, nobody is broken.
I
And
was just going to say, we're not
and no
broken.
one exactly, no one is broken and no one needs to be fixed,
Yeah.
right? Are there things that feel uncomfortable that we would like to heal and be different? Yes. And when we were on this, but when that perspective isn't there and we are on this search for the fix, it's like you get on this wheel of like, okay, I've done this program and now I need to do this thing and now I'm on to the next. And it doesn't give us space to sit in the ending of things. And so I'm just gonna. I have a mentor who's been talking about this a lot, like thinking about where you are good at, like starting, maintaining, or ending.
Oh, yes.
And yeah, and so I can speak from my own perspective. Like I'm great at starting things, so good. I am not good at ending things. And when we
Oh,
and yeah, and so when we look at healing as this process, I think there needs to be space where we just give ourselves time to sit with, like, I've spent some time doing this bit of healing. This is the learning that I have had. I can, welcome the ending of the cycle that represents, and also know that like there's not the end.
Right.
now I just have more information for where I need to go next. But it's not a search of fix, of find and fix. It's a cycle of endings and beginnings.
So, yeah, I just thought I would kind of write a few things down.
Yeah.
So I'm actually an engineer by trade. So chemical engineering is what I studied. So I'm typically a very linear thinker, but source has wanted me not to be necessarily that, to expand a little bit more. So in what you're talking about, there are several things that come up. So first off, when we feel we are broken, again, there's this piece of there's a right and a wrong, and there isn't. There's that middle. What is that middle piece? You're great at beginnings. I am great at beginnings and endings. Middles, woof, that's a tough one for me. So when we have that mentality in my world, in my life, when we have that mentality of quick fix or we're broken, um, what we get is this constant chronic sense of urgency and fear. We're not going to get to where we need to go to. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And so when we have that undercurrent in the flow of our life, we cannot take that breath and to sit back and to say, okay, what's really going on? And give ourselves the self love that we so much deserve each and every day, each and every moment. But yet we sit there and we perpetuate this feeling of fear. And so when we're doing that, a mentor of mine just shared this with me, and it was like, yeah, this is very true. We I'm not just working with people from their physical sense. I always talk about mental, emotional, physical. There's also the spiritual piece.
Hmm.
But I'm really working with when you start to drill down some of the things that I work with people, I'm working with that concept of not good enough, the self-worth, the self-love. And how many of us, especially it's mostly women who I'm working with, I do have a few men, but how many of us, especially as females, do we look at ourselves and we say, I'm not good enough in some way, shape, or form? And then add on to that the fact that we are so hyper focused. We've got this lens that just points to the physical all the time. Well, what about the mental and the emotional pieces? Because those are just as important, if not more important, than the physical part.
Yeah, for sure. I refer to those components of our wholeness as the anchors. And
Yes.
that, yeah, without those anchors, it's really hard to sustain any sort of physical change because our
Yes.
body is just communicating to us what we're feeling, right? Like what's happening on the inside. And if we don't have that emotional, spiritual grounding to anchor into, sustainable change is really hard. It's really challenging.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I have to ask, can you hear the noise that's going on behind me?
No,
Or no? Okay, good. Then
no,
the
it's
cat's
totally
playing
good.
with a toy. I thought I moved all the things and shut off the phones and all the things. But anyway, okay.
I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah, the anchors. I love that. I love that concept of anchors. And I think we again, when we look at that society of the whole quick fix mentality, it's almost like we're definitely not giving ourselves permission to delve deeper into those anchors, because things should be fixed. But one of the things that we're doing is we're not even allowing the the thought of delving into those anchors. So those are things that they're not even on the radar, you
No.
know? And
Yeah.
so when I think, coming back to coming back to like a typical client for me, um, when people first start with me, I look at things, I look at the whole person. And there are so many things that come into the top of that foundation of that whole person. And when we look at a more traditional healing from a an allopathic source from your doctor, they're not looking at that whole piece. They're looking at pieces of that. And so when people start to look at the bigger piece, it can sometimes become very overwhelming for them because they start to discover and they start to see how some of these other anchors are impacting them. And it can actually become a little frightening, um, based on that, especially if they are still in the mindset, which they are typically at that point of, I need to fix this and then move on to the next thing, not looking at it from the perspective of, this is this dynamic journey, this dynamic movement that is going to open so many doors for me. So many doors, because I get to look at all of these different things. I get to examine all of these different things, and it's going to impact me globally, for myself, for my family, for my partner or spouse, for the joy in my life. I mean, it goes so far beyond that physical, right, Lisa?
Oh, absolutely. And my approach is the same when I work with people, because when you realize that we are all interconnected beings, it is impossible to start looking at things in isolation, right?
Yes.
Because you realize that's just, it's only a tiny little piece of that story. And
Yep.
if we're not looking at the integrated whole, that's why we end up on this search of, okay, well, or the mentality of, well, I fixed this thing, now I need to fix the next thing.
Right.
Or even sort of, I hate to use the words more or less, it's not more or less, it's just different, but it's like, oh well, I fixed this thing, why don't I feel better? And then you start going into this deficit of like, well, I keep fixing things but I don't feel better, so what is wrong with me?
That's
Right. And I
right.
can, like, we were having the conversation earlier about, as practitioners, sometimes we give ourselves even a harder time about, like, I have all these tools, why am I not, like, operating as a perfect human being in the world?
Right,
and
right, right.
and I think if we did that, we wouldn't be able to serve people as well, because we wouldn't have the feeling and the experience of where we're at. But I can speak very truthfully about being on a new entrepreneurial journey.
Mm.
One of my issues is that, and it has, honestly, it's like my theme, nothing is ever enough.
Oh,
And it shows up in a way where even when I do something that I have been excited about, that this was like a goal, I do it, and immediately after, there's not a sense of elation, there's a sense of letdown.
oh,
And like, well, what's the next thing now?
maybe that's why you hate ends so much.
Yes. Oh yeah, there's a pretty clear theme. And I can articulate the theme, and I know that I have the tools for how to dig into that theme. And I I have moments of, I need help to do that too. Right.
Yeah.
Like, and that is part of also, I think, that interconnected part is knowing that no one is here to do this healing work alone. We all chose to be here together at this time to be able to support each other. And that is a theme that comes up for me a lot. It was really funny, actually. A client said to me, this is surprisingly effective. Which I laughed, and I was like, I'm gonna accept that with the, like, joy, with the love. I know that it was intended. And she was like, no, no, it has nothing to do with you, but everything to do about me and the idea that I have, that anything in this realm, coaching, therapy, healing, is fluffy, and it's a nice to have. but it's not a necessity. And that is the mind frame, I think, and from observation of where a lot of people are operating, and that I should be able to do this alone. Healing is a nice to have, but it's not a necessity. And it's not going to feel as real and authentic if I do it with somebody than if I were to actually do it myself, thanks to our very individualistic culture that we live in.
So, Pandora's box opened further. So when you talk about healer, it took me a long time to be able to really authentically grab onto I am a healer, and to be able to say it and actually believe it, I think is a big piece. And
Mm-hmm.
as a healer, one of the things that I have learned is that, as we talked about, healing is ongoing. I feel like it's never going to end. Um, and it shouldn't end, because our world is not static. And so we have to work within the parameters of whatever situational thing that we are presented with. And that may require us to pivot. And so I think, like COVID, for example, the pandemic was a great eye opener for people to really understand what the word pivot really meant, and how quickly that word actually became a buzzword. But kind of coming back to what you said in regards to being keeping ourselves in what I kind of drew here was a box. So when we are keeping ourselves in a box, so we're keeping ourselves static, we're not dynamic. We're also very limiting ourselves with what you said with your ends. And I can't remember now exactly how you put it, but it translated to not enough. So in the you reach the end, and what's the next thing, and why isn't it, I can't remember exactly how you said it, but so when we keep ourselves in that box, one of the things that happens is, this whole experience that we have in life is the circle around the box, and that circle doesn't have an ending, if you will. And from that perspective, when we know that there is something bigger than us in that circle, and we truly have the belief for it, then we can open ourselves up to the possibilities of what is outside of that circle at any given time. And so in that perspective, the part of not being enough doesn't show up, because there's always enough. It's infinite. And that's where one of my mentors has helped me to understand what the word abundance means. And so even when we come back, abundance is not a destination to try and reach. It is an all-knowing that there is something much bigger than us. And in that, we can always access it. And so, when we start to have our thinking go more in that direction, it takes away the not enough. It takes away the need to fix something, the need to have an ending to healing, if you will. Because you know that you can access whatever you need to access in whatever moment at any time. And so, but it doesn't help, I am human. I am the one who also goes back to, why do these test results show these numbers? And then why aren't they better if I'm doing the ideal things?
Yeah.
Which is a
Yeah.
true story.
Oh, absolutely. Because as much as we connect with our greater being, we
Yep.
do still live in human skin.
Yep.
And so it becomes this dance, is the way I'm trying to conceptualize it now, of like, you have your realizations, you have your understandings, you have your knowings, just like I was talking about in my situation. Like I can diagnose myself, for lack of a better word. I can know all the things I need to do. And in my humanness, this is the agreement I had, is like, this is how I'm going to experience this. And what I need to do is forgive myself.
Yes.
Right? It's that work of constant forgiveness of it's okay. You're not met. You don't have to be perfect. There's no perfect at this. And
No.
it's interesting that this is sort of the way our conversation is going, because I was earlier this week, I was listening to Alok on Glennon Doyle's podcast, We Can Do Hard Things. And it was this really beautiful conversation that is deep and rich, but the central message of what he was saying is that there, where all of this hatred and fear comes from is essentially from the fear of death. That
Mm-hmm.
we will never be that there is scarce time, there are scarce resources, that we will never be enough in this life. And that it's really that fear of death, that fear of the ending of this incarnation, where all of that scarcity comes from. So going back to what you're talking about with that circle, when we're able to access that, it's like a pressure relief valve, right? And
Yes.
it involves really approaching the end of life in a very different way, right? Instead of looking at it as like, well, that's the hard out of this incarnation. Yes, and we are infinite, and we continue, and there's more story. And if we were to shift it from this like deep grief to a celebration of, look at the story we wrote this time, how amazing is that? And what's
Yeah.
the next story going to be?
And that's so interesting because I wrote here, fear death, not living while we can.
Yeah.
And that's I think the one of the biggest things is that when I'm working with people, and again, I'm learning how to communicate this because it's not, each individual is so unique. In order to be able to connect with them in a way that they can hear the message for what it is intended, which can be really tricky at times, because I know for myself, um, there are times I have to hear something so many times in so many ways, and then finally, the light bulb comes on. But when we're sitting in this place of the fix it need and the end, then we forget to live. We forget to live during the time. And I think that's one of the biggest messages that I guess I would like to kind of bring to this conversation, is that um, when when we lose the sight of just enjoying the moment. And I know we've talked, so many people have talked about being in the moment. That's when we lose, I feel, the gift that we have, which is this life. And I'm an equestrian. I've been an equestrian for 53 years now. And the horses, one of my careers, the horses teach you so much. And one of the biggest things that they teach you is being in the moment. And that is when uh, time becomes, um, I want to say limitless, or limitless, because you lose track of time. And you are so in the moment that you can flow.
Yes.
And with that, when you're in your when you're in your healing, that could be translated to being out, being on a walk, listening to whatever is around you at that time, and becoming completely saturated with it, lost in it, to a point where that is feeding your cells exactly the way that it needs to, from a healing perspective and from all of those, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about like we are way out here, which was like my favorite place to be. I'm sorry for people who are listening, my
Yep.
arms are up big. We're like way out here in the like big space. And if we were to bring it down to the really concrete,
Mm.
I'd love to get your thoughts about this when we're thinking about food and nutrition and the way we fuel ourselves. One of the things that I've been wondering about, and for people who listen to the show, like my favorite intersection to be is science and woo. So I always,
Love it.
like the intersection of those two things. So before I say this, I want to acknowledge that there are food sensitivities and issues that are real and concrete, and people experience them. Full stop. And I also wonder if, in some cases, we get so wound up in the story about what a certain food does to us that we create an energy around it that makes sure we're right. Right. So,
Yeah.
yeah, what I'm thinking is like really specifically what I'm thinking about is if, someone has been doing a particular type of diet, like let's say keto, and they have now written this story that anything outside of what's permissible in keto is bad and is going to make them feel terrible and is like not a good source of nutrition. Yes, I know. So Anka is making the points again, right? But what we're doing is generating that kind of energy around that food. So if we do eat it, of course, it is going to make us feel that way. And I'd love to know what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, I love the intersection of what was it, science and woo. That's fantastic because one of the things that I'm moving more toward is I'm very much an intuitive. We all are, but I think I'm embracing that more. And in that, I really feel like each and every one of us knows exactly what is going to be nourishing for us and what is not. And I'm saying nourishing, not good or bad,
Yes, thank you.
nourishing.
Mm-hmm.
So there are, I think anytime you put parameters on things, you run the risk of taking away some of that nourishment. Having said that, there are people. So when I'm working with somebody, there's data that I gather. So there's data from our conversations, but then there's actual test data that might come in. And we look at the whole being. We look at how that person is presenting themselves, what their experiences have been from an antecedent standpoint. So from what their history with their familial history and everything else is, all the way to the present day. But when we look at that data, and that data tells us very clearly that right now, gliadin protein, gluten, is not good for them, then, and it's causing certain issues, and then the symptomology is also congruent with what that data is sharing with us, and their intuition, not a decision to stay in a box like keto, for example,
Mm-hmm.
but their intuition is telling them, boy, I don't want to eat this piece of bread because I think I'm going to feel, I don't feel good. Like it doesn't feel good,
Mm-hmm.
nourishing. So I feel like when we allow ourselves to understand what do we, here's the moment again. What do we need in this moment? Does this mean we have to be gluten-free, Anka, for the rest of our lives? No. And I don't know. I can't tell you because your body is going to change when you give it the things that it needs to be nourished with in the moment. And you, client, person, then have to be, I don't like to use the word have to, then I invite you to then be patient and kind and loving to yourself and with yourself, to not put an end to this, and then to be able to go with the flow of what you might need a month from now, 6 months from now, a year, 2, 3 years from now. Because being in my 60th decade, It is very different from what I needed to nourish myself in my 20s and 30s
Yes.
than what I need to do today. And I guess
Oh,
that's a great way of, putting it out there. I'm in
yeah.
a, yeah. And
Sorry,
then,
go ahead.
no. And then there's all the environmental impacts, like what is happening around us that is influencing those needs for nourishment.
Mm.
So I think to quickly answer your question, the box is really a dangerous place for me. That's a big danger zone.
Yes.
And most of us come into this kind of coaching or this work in a box, or maybe in several boxes, you know.
Yeah.
So,
And thank you for articulating so clearly, again, going back to the really looking and listening to the whole of our being. Because that, when you talked about a piece of bread, maybe right now it is not nourishing, but it doesn't mean that that is forever. Right. And just really staying tuned in. And it's another way of tuning into our body. Right.
yes,
And what our body is telling us it needs. So when we are somatically disconnected, it is a really good and concrete strategy to use as a way of tuning into our body and what our body actually needs.
yeah,
And I can, like, a concrete example from my own is I, for a while, did paleo. And I had gotten into this narrative of like, oh, bread and pasta, like it makes me feel this way and it's really bad for me. And then I started shifting the exercise that I was doing, and I was lifting weights and lifting heavier weights. And my body started telling me, sister, you need more sustenance than what you are getting. There's a reason you're hungry all the time and grouchy. So
yeah,
let's try this again and see what happens. And I started making bread, which also has a very different I'm going to say energetic resonance as well. When it's something that you
yes,
have made and poured your own love and energy into, and I eat pasta and bread, and I feel great, and it has done is fueled my body in the way that it needed.
yeah. And I think one of the things that I hear so often is I don't know what to eat anymore, because when you're chronically unwell, you've typically gone through a lot of things. You might have gone through a lot of professionals. You might have gone through a lot of your own. I should be able to fix it. I'm a smart person. I should be able to do this on my own. And you come to the point of self-flagellation, where you say, I don't know what to eat anymore. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm useless. I have no idea where to go. And I'm not enough. And that comes back to that whole piece.
Mm-hmm.
But the, the piece that I want to focus on here is that I don't know what to eat anymore. And I find that there's nothing more sad
Yeah.
than having this bountiful, beautiful table of options of
Mm-hmm.
nourishment for our bodies, for our souls, and feeling like we have to pick or choose through it, um, because again, we've labeled them bad or good,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not part of it.
No, because it eliminates the joy, right?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Nourishing ourselves, that word is so beautiful because we can use it on so many levels. But nourishing our bodies and nourishing our mind and heart and soul should be joyful, right? It should feel good. We want to be approaching that from an asset stance, not a deficit stance.
yeah,
So when we are in this state of constantly restricting, we are removing so much of the joy of the process. And I go back and forth in my own self and consciousness around. I think if you asked a lot of people, they would say that I am very intense and serious. I would say.
okay.
And
I haven't seen that
also,
side, but okay.
maybe in the educator world, maybe
Okay.
because I am able to stand in my fullness a little bit more. And thank you. That's good feedback for me because I still have that story playing in my head. And this sense of, well, what are, like, this whole thing is absurd anyway. This whole, like, what is so serious? This is not so serious. This is just all absurd. And so let's stand back and look at the absurdity of it and have a really good sense of humor and say, you know what? Let's just find the joy in the absurd.
So I wrote down here joy with an exclamation mark, and then three things that I really feel are a big contributor to how we feel. And so that is that sleep, stress, and food or nourishment.
Mhm.
And so when I think about going to bed, I literally go bed, 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 bed. I
You
get
do.
really excited about going to bed. Now, I could, on the other hand, go, oh my God, it's time to go to bed. And I'm going to wake up and I'm not going to sleep well. And I'm, just not going to feel rejuvenated and replenished and bed. So I have two ways of looking at it. So I don't still sleep through the night typically. Again, working on my own healing. But bed is a sense of joy, and I approach it that way. Same thing with food. And so when we take away that simple, free, abundant thing of joy around these things, it's really doing ourselves a disservice. And even like, so that's the sleep, the food, the stress. How many of us reach the end of a day, reach the end of a week, are living for the weekends, are living for getting through the next event because it's
Mhm.
causing so much stress. And stress is a part of life, as we all know. If we can start to look at it from the perspective of it's a flow, it's an ebb and flow. And so when I'm in the place of where I can have more joy around stress, I'm going to embrace that fully. And when things are in a place where it's more difficult to find that joy, I'm going to try and find one little thing that I can be joyful about, that I can have gratitude with around that. And
Mhm.
so, that's always where the mantra, the word that comes into my mind is be kind. And so does that mean be kind to myself or be kind to somebody else? Because there's nothing better than being kind and feeling that gratitude.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, so that whole little piece. And as you were saying, we're, I can't remember again exactly how you said it, but life's too short. Like, let's
Mhm.
enjoy where we're at. Let's see it with joy.
Yeah. And I think what you said there reminded me of, that's how we shift state, right? So
Yes.
state is how we feel in our body and it influences our behavior. So when we're in that state of everything is hard and everything is challenging, then that's how our behavior reflects that, like, I have to force myself to do this, or, you know, that 80s anthem, everybody's working for the weekend. And if we are able to shift our state, which is what you were talking about, of be approaching bed from that place of like, yes, I get to go to bed now. Yes, this feels joyful. Like, it's the same conversation I have around movement. It's like, shift the state around, I
Yeah.
get to move this way. I get to put on a banging playlist and like crank it out and have fun, right? Like, that shifts the state. And when you shift your state, it shifts your behavior. So then
Right.
the behavior becomes it becomes easier, right? It becomes more reflective of the state that you are in.
And it becomes cellular. That
Ooh,
shifting of
I love
states. I love how you stated that because it becomes cellular. And so when we think about our cells work on a primal, um, a primal survival mechanism. And so, stress is one of the best examples of this. Our body even when you've got that jam and playlist and you're doing your workout. I love weightlifting, heavy weights, so when you get into that place and the hormones are going and things are flowing, your body is still perceiving that as a state of stress.
Yes.
And looking at that from a cellular perspective, how are your cells responding to that state? So if you are in a state of gratitude or in a positive state, it's going to help you from that cellular perspective, how your cells actually respond to that. And then can they stay, this kind of gets a little bit too in depth with the physiology of things, but can they stay in an open state where they can be receiving of the things that they need and then giving of the things that they should be giving? Or do they feel like they have to have a cellular defense mechanism that blocks them out and seals everything up and doesn't let what needs to get out and or in, which causes a lot of the symptomology that we feel? So kind of getting back to how do people feel? Well, it can depend. It can get down to that cellular level.
And I'm going to please correct me if I'm wrong, because this is a guess on my part. However, I would imagine that when cells are in that state where they're in protection mode, that it's more energy expensive than when they
Yes.
are open to reception. So even at that cellular level, we're causing that exhaustion in our body because
Yes.
energy that we have is going to that primal level of protection.
Well, I can geek out here for a second. So in our cells, let's go back to biology 101. In our cells, we have the little power pack called the mitochondria.
Yeah.
And those little guys are made specifically for two things. They're made for what most people think about with mitochondria. They are made for the energy producers for that cell. They're also cellular protectors. So if you have too much energy going out, and I'll kind of come back to that in a second, the mitochondria sense that and they say, ooh, we've got way too much energy going out. Time for protection mode. So they switch from energy producers to cellular protectors.
Yes.
Now we don't have energy anymore. How many people have lack of energy, poop out very quickly, don't have resilience, have hypothyroid, have all of these things? It's connected to IBS and IBD, all the things. But where does that go back to? Is that because your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual is not being nourished to the point where the energy expenditure of that little cellular mitochondria is too much? And that tiny little thing is causing these big results or effects that we are experiencing. And we're not even thinking about that tiny little mitochondria, but it's going, nah, I'm going to protect you here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is, it is fascinating, right? I love knowing and helping people understand their body. So I think that element is really important. And when we think about what do we do about it, it's the core four, right? The intersection of sleep, stress management, movement, and nutrition.
Yep.
It's the constant mantra, and it is as simple and complex as that.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And that's what I think has had me land in this place as far as my purpose on this earth, is that I am fascinated by the infinite amount of information about these kind of conversations that just develop, as we move through the conversation. And again, the infinite amount of knowledge, or information that we can play with. And that's for me what this is about. This is there is a joy, a fun, a game, playful
Yeah.
component to it. Um, and and I have to make sure that at times I don't take myself too seriously. Like, oh, come on, guys, we're 4 points down. Whoever the other guys are, right?
Yeah.
But just being able to say, um, "Wow, isn't this fascinating? Um, what can I learn from it? Where do I need to go? What rabbit hole can I go down today?"
Yes.
um, which is a lot of fun for me, is to go down some of these rabbit holes, um, to be able to help others feel better.
Yeah.
So
And that
ultimately,
ultimately, that is our purpose and our service. So
yeah,
thank you so much for being here today. This was such a fun conversation. We could keep going for forever. And
I know.
I will make sure that all of Anka's links are in the show notes. If something she said resonated with you, you'll be able to find her there and connect. And thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us today.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for the opportunity and for offering this to people. I think being able to get the message out, from so many different points of view, and all of your expertise is just a beautiful gift that you're giving to everybody else. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this transformative journey today. Your support means the world to me. If you resonated with our conversations and want to uplift the Transforming 45 community, here's what you can do. One, subscribe and share. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you found value here, share it with your friends, family, and anyone seeking inspiration. Two, leave a review. On whatever platform you are listening on, your words can make a significant impact and help others find their way to these transformative stories. Three, connect. Join the conversation on my social media platforms. Follow me at lboat for updates, behind the scenes, and more heart centered content. And four, guest recommendations. If you know someone whose story could inspire someone else, reach out and let me know. I love connecting with diverse voices that carry the power to transform lives. Remember, it is your support that is the magic in my mission. Together, we can create a community of empowerment, growth, and healing. Thank you for being part of the Transforming 45 family. Until next time, keep shining your light and embracing your journey.